you'll never believe this, by the way, but I've been to 10 different elementary schools growing up. Lessons from that kind of came back to being able to cope with change and adapting to change and being nimble. We climb the hill and there's a carrot over the hill. You see a few others fall back. As Canadians, we're like, oh my God, I got to go back and help everybody. Instead of climbing up the top, they go back down. They try to bring people back up. If you told your parents that you graduated from university and you have $40,000 of debt and mom and dad, I'm going to go work for a startup, to them, you're a failure. You are putting your entire livelihood on the line. You are saying that I will take everything I own. I will refinance my home. I will take loans from the bank. I will max out my credit cards to build this thing that I fundamentally believe in that will change the world or change an industry or change a sector. And you're alone.
Welcome back to another episode of the Generation Hustle Podcast, a show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Ryerson, alongside my good friend Amin, and this week we have really exciting news. We're happy to announce that this is the 50th episode of the podcast. Thank you to all of our listeners and followers who have been along this journey thus far. We appreciate the support more than we can put into words. We are constantly learning and growing, and fitting to our name of hustlers, we have an incredible story of perseverance and success today. Episode 50 is with Abdullah Snobar, Executive Director of the DMZ at Ryerson University and the Chief Executive Officer of DMZ Ventures. Ranked as one of the top university-based tech incubators in the world, the DMZ provides a launchpad for founders to build and scale fast. To date, the DMZ has helped more than 400 startups raise over $1 billion in capital, while creating over 4,000 jobs. Under Abdullah's leadership, the DMZ has built a presence for Canadian startups to grow in New York City and was ranked as the #1 tech incubator or accelerator in the world by UBI Global. So we sit down to talk to Abdullah about his non-traditional path into tech. He details his journey from a Palestinian immigrant to serving in the Canadian Armed Forces to founding a non-profit in Kenya to today becoming recognized as one of Canada's top 40 under 40. This was an incredibly inspirational conversation that intertwines so many facets of culture and society. We hope you find this as enlightening and informative as we did.
A lot of individuals know Abdullah as the executive director of the DMZ, but many individuals may not know the fact that you actually immigrated to Canada as a child who had the hopes of pursuing a career in the hospitality industry. So quite disconnected from tech where you are now, but, describe to us what it was like, coming into a new country first off, and, you were exposed to a new culture and new environment. And so how did you assimilate and adapt?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you, I think you could have asked me a million times a few years ago if you'd ever joined the tech space, and I probably would have told you 10 million times that I probably wouldn't. And here I am today, obviously. So it's just kind of life. The world works in mysterious ways, as they always say, and I couldn't be more blessed. But I think for me, I have an interesting kind of journey towards being in Canada. I first came here at the age of 3. But then I kind of kept going back and forth. I'm originally Palestinian, but I was born and raised in Jordan, and that's kind of where home was for me at the earliest ages. And my parents, you'll never believe this, by the way, but I've been to 10 different elementary schools growing up.
Wow.
10 different, and I really mean that, 10 different elementary schools. And high school, maybe it's a bit more comprehensible. It's a bit more understood because you're mature. You can kind of adapt, but as a child going to 10 different elementary schools, it was insane for us. And, my parents are not diplomats. They were just in many cases a bit confused about where to stay and where to go.
Right.
And I'm glad we chose Canada as home. But a big part of it for me was actually being able to have, kind of, building out my own identity, right? Understanding where I was and, what the kind of friends I wanted to make and the kind of places I wanted to be involved in and things I wanted to be involved in. To say it was easy would be a lie. But I think a lot of it came back to, the biggest lessons from that kind of came back to being able to cope with change and adapting to change and being nimble, and always being kind of social, right? And that in itself, the social aspect of things, kind of gave me the ability to connect and engage with people that were outside of my conventional circles, right? And it made me realize that the world is bigger than just who you know, and there's a lot of perspectives and opinions and people and characters and different acts of kindness that you can kind of relate to, and it just made me really appreciate that so much more. So although I can't say that you ever really fully adapt, you learn how to take part in something that's really special. in particular with Canada, it just, I hands down always say it's the best country on earth. And I think we're all very fortunate to be here, despite the cold weather that we sometimes have to deal with. But I think that in itself is a bit of a blessing, because it makes you realize that there's something to look forward to when the summer comes around, So
Yeah.
it's all good.
What was your experience like in your first winter here, or snow? What was the experience of seeing snow?
Let me tell you, it was the greatest experience of life, because, the first time is always like the aha, wow moment, but then you get into the second, third, fourth time, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Now, as a guy that also comes from warmer climate, unfortunately, I never got to engage or participate in winter sports, right? So,
Yeah.
when I see my friends go, I've tried it, don't get me wrong. I always try everything twice. I'm a big believer in that, and you have to try everything twice to make sure that you give it a fair chance. But I remember, my second time going snowboarding, I thought I was kind of getting better. I was on the bunny hill. I'm going down on the bunny hill, and somehow I do an unintentional 360, and I land on my bum. And I was in the harshest pain you can ever imagine. I stand up, and the instructor comes to me and says, "Listen, you're doing a great job. Here's a sticker. Go up to the next hill." I looked at him like, "Are you crazy? I'm not going up to the next hill. I'm going home. I'm going to go to the chalet, hang out until everybody's done, and I'm going to go home." And that was it. But no, in any case, I still do enjoy the winter activities. Again, being in Toronto, that's where I live. Pre-COVID times, there's a lot to indulge in and a lot to engage with, and the different events and kind of festivals and everything else. So I'm not, I'm not that anti-winter. I just definitely prefer summer.
Yeah, no, I think most people do, and hopefully things get better so we can actually enjoy summer for once in the last 2 years. You actually have a unique story too. There's you shared a personal story around a trip where you stayed at a Holiday Inn. And so this is where you, I guess, first became fascinated with the hospitality industry. And so, how did that experience kind of, work its way in and build that passion for the hospitality industry? And, how's it served you in your time at DMZ as well?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. The story kind of happens when I was like between the ages of 10 to 12, something along those lines. I was still living in Jordan, and my father took me to, it's the Red Sea. It's a little city called Aqaba on the coast of the Red Sea. And we went there and we stayed at the Holiday Inn for a few nights. And I was floored by like this world of like hospitality and kind of engaging with people and servicing people and everything else. And I think that kind of opened up my eyes for an industry that I never really anticipated before, to be honest with you. So I got pretty intrigued, and I started, I kind of kept my eyes on the hospitality space just to kind of see how I can possibly engage there. I think that experience in itself kind of made me realize that this is an area I want to get into, and that's actually what I ended up specializing in my BCom at university, but with a specialty in hospitality. And I ended up working in both Fairmont and Marriott hotels and resorts. And the one thing that always stuck with me was service excellence. It was those two words: service excellence, service excellence. Although I've completely transformed industries right now, I think the lessons that you kind of take from the hospitality industry have been tremendous. And one of the biggest lessons I always looked at was I don't necessarily believe that the customer is always right, which is the cliche saying in the hospitality industry, but the customer is the customer. And you kind of go out, and in my world now, the entrepreneur is the entrepreneur. So you got to do what you can, and everything in your power to ensure that their success is effectively defining your success. And you got to be able to kind of do whatever it takes to make sure that you get the job done. And again, it's no surprise I left the hospitality industry, and I'll call it the moment of truth, or the realization point for me was that I learned over time, after working at both Marriott and Fairmont, that I actually love going to hotels, not necessarily working in hotels. And it's a big difference. It's a huge difference. But a lot of my work right now within the DMZs have been completely. It's actually transferred quite nicely into the from the hospitality space into the tech world, because when you can fundamentally pinpoint who you serve and who you're there for to help and support, you understand the core of the business. And I'm not a tech guy. I'm actually a service guy. And I always tell my staff and my team, we're not tech people per se. We are in the service industry. We are here to service and support people that are building great businesses to change the world one day at a time. And we got to be part of that journey through delivering the right resources and services. So, I'm obviously grateful for what I've learned, but it's let's just say never looking back from there and kind of going forward with what I'm doing today.
Right. Would you consider yourself a foodie as well through just your passion through the
Big time.
hospitality industry?
Oh my God. Yeah. That's, food is my life. It's when they say, when people say that if music be the food of love, then give me excess of it. And that's
Right.
what I always want. You can always get to my heart with food, and it's one of the things that keep me sane in this world. Actually, it's food.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the unique kind of pathways you've had in your journey is that you've also joined the Canadian Armed Forces, which I find really unique. And so how did that experience in the military actually change you and help you grow? Because that's totally usually off grid. And again, thankful for the service that you obviously provide the country. And it's also unique from the fact that you actually immigrated to the country and wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I that was one of the probably, if not the best single-handed experience I've ever had in my entire life. It was a self-made decision that I wanted to do. My parents were, not they were scared of me wanting to kind of join, and they were worried about me and my health and my safety and everything else. I joined it after, I was working before the army. I was working at Food Basics. That was one of my earlier jobs, stocking Coke and sugar and chips in the aisles. And before that, even at Food Basics, I was a cart boy. So I was collecting all the carts that people typically leave stranded in the parking lots. But so I joined. I was actually the youngest person in my unit, the Canadian Armed Forces. I was only 16 years old when I joined, and everybody around me was in their late 20s, early 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever you wanted. There's a lot of lessons to take from being in the army. I think first and foremost, you learn discipline, and I'm talking about discipline within yourself, and understanding, how to manage your life and manage your time. You learn respect, not just for others, but again, respect for yourself, and how to you start with you always, right? You start with the individual, then you kind of expand it out, and you let it trickle down to others. And then one of my favorite lessons I always took out of it is being ruthless about quality. And I don't need to tell anybody about what it means to be, quality, to bring quality to the military, because right now I haven't fully shaved, but if this was me going to the army, I'd be in big trouble at this point, right? And so there is ruthlessness about quality, which I absolutely love. It's about having the mentality of greatness, and it's always achieving, going to the full extent of what you can, but not individually. It's a collective effort, right? And that's why they always say in the army that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that's why when you have a weak link, you don't push them out or isolate them. You bring them with you. When they say high tides raise all ships, and this is exactly the scenario that we learned in the army. So it was a tremendous journey for me, and I just absolutely loved it.
One of the things that impedes a lot of individuals' growth is the concept of fear. Did that kind of experience also kind of help you manage and conquer fear in a better way in the new challenges that you face down the line in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think for me there was different levels of fear. The first level I kind of was faced with was the idea of being the youngest guy in the military, and now I have to be able to not just be able to fit in, but be able to fit in at the age that I was. So my maturity level had to kind of go, increase tenfold in the fastest pace possible, and I had to ensure that I can adapt myself to the environment. Taking that lesson back from going to 10 different elementary schools, I had some level of understanding of how to adapt and engage with others. But there was always the fear of the unknown, because with the army, it's a lot of unknown, right? You were just you were there, you were doing the work that you had to do, but you were also, you never knew what would be the next task that you would have to engage in and what would have to happen. So you learn not to be fearless, because I think that's almost impossible. I think you learn to cope with fear as it came along, and how to deal with it so that it doesn't bring you down and kind of tear you down.
Dude, you're like dropping so many gems within those sentences there. I'm loving it. But one of the things that you said there before that question was with the concept of, just understanding and being good with yourself before going outwards. And that kind of brings me to my next point here. While you were working for Ryerson, you started a nonprofit called Supa Maasai Foundation. So can you talk to us about that? Like, what was the goal of the foundation and what inspired you to build that?
Yeah, that was again another interesting journey in my life, right? That was also unexpected, and when you never plan for these things, they just
Mm.
kind of happen, and when they say opportunity meets preparation, that's kind of where things kind of fall in my lap. This one, I was actually fortunate enough to meet a really incredible young lady that went to Ryerson. She was from Kenya. She had only come to Canada a few years back. Her name was Teriano Lasancha. She was from a small village of 750 people called
Mm.
Lodariag. Anyway, she went to Ryerson, she graduated, and at that point, Ryerson had actually held a convocation ceremony for her in her village.
Right.
And that convocation ceremony was attended by almost 10,000 people from the entire community. So
Wow.
other villagers, other tribes, the people from Nairobi, politicians, deputy presidents showed up, everybody. It was insane. And when she came back, the former president of Ryerson, Sheldon Levy, said, "We need to continue this momentum. How do you ensure that you can build 100 other or 1,000 other Terrianos in this village, in these communities?" So I was given the task of helping Terriano do something that would be sustainable long term. So we started the work on the ground. I had the good fortune of living in Kenya for quite some time. I would go back and forth.
Mm.
I'd stay there for a few months, come back here for a bit, go back, so on and so forth. But we built a foundation called Supa Maasai, which in Maasai means hello Maasai. It's a greeting. Um, and the intention was to help women and children. Those were the two kind of main categories, and the three pillars that we had was number one, building a women's cooperative by allowing them to do beadwork, which was part of their very much part of their culture. The Maasai beadwork that a lot of us see on television and even pictures and books and whatnot, but doing it in a way that would allow for fair trade and fair wage, because a lot of the times it wasn't that case, and this was one of our biggest purposes. So we hired more than 150 women in this cooperative to actually help us do this. The second purpose was to really help establish a scholarship fund. And that kind of goes back to supporting the creation of more Terrianos in this world. And we wanted to, to create this fund, which did happen. And it was actually established by a lot of high net worth individuals here in Toronto, actually. And they were the first to put their checks behind it and kind of brought it all to life. We built a governing body in Lodariak, the small village that we were in, and they became the ones to manage it. The beauty of that particular initiative was that a lot of the times women in many tribal parts of Kenya do not have the ability or the opportunity to go to university. They're usually married off at a very young age, between age of 11 to 14, 15. They're not looked at as being the ones that should go to school or should get access to education. So by us establishing this fund, and by when I say us, it was really the community and the woman and Teriano and her family. It began to change mindset. It began to get people to think differently, right? It started to get people to understand that women can actually change things. And my short time in Kenya, I learned quickly that women are the backbone of the entire country. And honestly, and that's probably true in all cases. I can bet you anything that our mothers are probably more of a play a bigger part in our lives, generally speaking, than anybody else would, right? So anyways, that was one of the biggest things that I really kind of saw that was a big change agent and getting people's mindsets to kind of grow. And the last thing was about building and establishing a girls rescue center. And that one was done in partnership with the Canadian High Commission in Nairobi. And how do you build a community where girls who want access to resources and education and again, some freedom of life and choice were able to go somewhere and escape forced marriages and all that kind of stuff. So that was the intention of the foundation. It continues on till today. It's done a tremendous job, and I'm very honored to have even been a small part of that.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And that was actually going to be my next question in terms of like how that, what was the most rewarding part of it? But you kind of spilled it out all there, like just to see how it went from one person to now a community, and it's going to be an annual thing. And like, there's always going to be that connection there. Can you speak to kind of how that makes you feel to be a part of something like that and to see how that's evolved now, like just that impact of it?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you this. When I first there's a bit of ignorance in all of this, right? You kind of look at the world and you say, oh, look, Africa, they're poor, there's a lot of health issues, water challenges and everything else. My mindset going in the beginning was always to be humble and show humility around everything. But I also expected that I'd be going to Africa to save people.
Right.
What I learned at the end of it, to be honest with you, is I was going there effectively to save myself, to give myself perspective, to understand that as much and as little and as few as you have, the world isn't all about material things. It's not about having the best car and the nicest house and the headphones and everything else, because they don't necessarily have those things.
Right.
That's true. But what they do have is the foundation of family that will never die. They literally eat together, they live together, they walk together. It's part of their ethos of what they do. They understand happiness in its absolute form, and what it means to be happy. It's the smallest things that bring you all the joy sometimes, as they say it. And to feel sorry for them is an injustice in many cases, right? They feel sorry for us, believe it or not, because it's funny. I always say, as a North American, as a Canadian, we always have to plan these vacations and that's what we look forward to, because we're trying to escape reality.
Right.
Well, to them, life is, they take it one step at a time and they enjoy the moment as it comes, and they don't necessarily stress too much. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings that I got, and I will forever be grateful for the people of not just Lodariak, but also of another village that I was also in, called Kisi called Dago, and I was also able to spend some time in other communities, and the learnings you just take are life changing. So I absolutely loved it.
I was going to say, I really like that point, because I had a similar experience when I bring this kind of trip up multiple times because it's really impacted me personally. So we went to Peru and I did a 2-day hike. And while I was kind of experiencing it, we had natives that were with us. And so, we started asking them a question of just like, one, we started realizing a lot of these natives live a lot longer than, traditional Western individuals do.
Yeah.
And two, they were always happy. To your point, they literally don't have many resources, but they do have a sense of family. And the one thing that they continue to say to us is like, you Westerners live in a stressed environment 24/7. We don't live in this kind of consistent, external reality of just like, you have to go to work, you have to get paid, you have to pay bills and stuff like that. We live off the land, we have our family, we're happy all the damn time. And so when I came back, it just started making me think, it's just like, you know what, I don't probably need that like new iPhone or all that kind of stuff to, give me some type of dopamine hit or whatever you want to call it, right? It's just like, to your point, perspective is so important. If you look at so many different societies across the world, they live so entirely different than the Western kind of culture. And I think, it's important for us to start inheriting that kind of perspective and applying it to our lives, just because, stress is a killer. And I could tell like many people, especially during COVID too, it's just amplifying.
That's so true. I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And like just on that like line of thought, I mean, obviously with your personal journey as well, and through this initiative, can you kind of tell us what would be your advice to someone who's new to the country and hoping to kind of make an impact, make something of themselves, whether that's Canada or anywhere, right? Just based on your experiences thus far.
Yeah, look, I think, let me speak specifically more to Canada, because that's obviously what I'm more accustomed to. But I think one of the things that kind of always come to mind is going into any new environment, always keep an open mind, right? And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that you kind of have to take within, and you have to also appreciate that going in with assumptions and already having some judgments made kind of closes you off for what's actually possible and what you can obviously open yourself up to. So I think just be open-minded, get involved in communities that are not your own. And let me repeat that: get involved in communities that are not your own. We, as Canadians, one of the most beautiful things that we have is diversity. But the challenge with diversity and where it actually becomes ineffective is when you completely commit yourself to just your own community and that circle and that bubble that you never actually see yourself come out. And the minute you put yourself out there, and you, as a person from different countries, whether it be from China or from India or from Poland, whatever, it doesn't matter. The minute you come and actually start integrating yourself and showing others what your culture is about, and how you can contribute and what you can do to support, it builds a level of understanding that you can never teach someone by just reading a book. It's just the human interaction is just so beautiful. So get involved, open-mindedness, and I think just generally speaking, always understand that there's beauty in difference, and there's beauty in not being completely the same as you, right? So those are some of the quick things that I would say always. But there's a lot more that we can do a whole talk about what to do to adapt into a new environment for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we should frame that, man. There's beauty in difference. You need that behind you, like on the wall or something. But so let's get into the DMZ here. So now it's 2014, and you've joined the DMZ, and after a few years, you became the executive director. So can you kind of describe to us what was that experience like? What was the early days like, and maybe like what was your vision as you were kind of building through this process of putting Toronto on the map?
Well, look, I'll tell you first and foremost. Again, jumping into DMZ, it took a little bit of time. I was still doing my work in Africa, and I was kind of coming back, and I was supporting DMZ as an advisor in many respects. But kind of jumping into the role as executive director in 2015, it was like a, and let me just say, a holy shit moment. I'm like, wow, what am I going to do here? I'm literally spending. I'm going to be running what's now known as one of the best and most prestigious tech incubators and accelerator programs in the country, and it's also being recognized globally.
Right.
And to me, it kind of brought me back to the lesson of working in the hospitality space: is put your finger on the pulse. Why are we here? Why do we exist? Why do we wake up in the morning to do the work that we do? And as much as you kind of turn and understand, community, this and that, no. It's about one thing: founders first. How do you fundamentally put your energy and your resources and your support behind the founder? Because when they succeed, everything else adds up. And to me, it was about my first, call it 30, 60, 90 days in office, as sometimes they kind of jokingly say, is I spent as much time as I possibly could talking to entrepreneurs, whether they were current, alumni, even potential new companies that were coming to this space, to understand what are my shortcomings as the head of an organization where my goal is to serve you.
Right.
I know that we're doing a great job. I don't want to hear that stuff. I hear that stuff through and through, and sometimes people don't want to tell you as the head of an organization that where your faults are. And I really built an environment, a comfortable environment for people to come up to me and say, listen, you need to do more programming. You got to be able to bring on better expertise. You got to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of it was the right timing to do that stuff, right? So my predecessor did a fantastic job. She was able to build an environment of community and serendipity where people can kind of connect in a physical environment, and that's what we needed for that given time. But as we all evolve naturally, as humans, we mature, we do new things, we grow up, we get a nicer haircut, we wear cleaner clothes and everything else. DMZ, and I'm not trying to compare it to a child. I'm just saying that DMZ was really on the verge of growing up so quickly that we had to be able to adapt ourselves again to serving the entrepreneur and the founder as they saw fit to us. And that's where it was a lot of research, a lot of listening, and we listened 3 times more than we spoke. And it was just a matter of understanding what we had to do and what we had to change internally to be the best at what we do.
And maybe you can lean in on that a little bit, because what we like to ask a lot of, especially people in the tech space in Toronto, is kind of what were the challenges that you guys faced in the early days in terms of maybe understanding the market or understanding startups within the area? Just because Toronto, I feel like that reputation is just starting to build up as a tech ecosystem, and it's starting to get there. But obviously, we were talking about 5-6 years ago where it was non-existent, right?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you, when I first kind of came into the space, I think we were speaking like aliens sometimes when we go into like corporate industries and government and whatnot. People just didn't understand our world. They're like, well, okay, you guys it's cute, it's nice, go ahead, we'll throw you guys some money. And that's not what we wanted. We were looking for mainstream change. We wanted people to kind of look at this as the new way, the new model forward. And I think we're seeing that much more now. But if you kind of go back in the past, our biggest challenges were just getting people to understand, to unlearn what they learned before about the startup world, and to recognize that this is going to be a digital revolution happening in many respects, or just a change in how industries would need to adapt themselves to the customers and whatnot. So, one of the things that I learned quickly was that when I kind of joined, it was a very small ecosystem. I think, and don't quote me on the numbers, but I think there was probably, let's just say, about 20 or 15 incubators and accelerator programs across the country.
Okay.
And maybe about 500 startups that existed as well. And during those times, by the way, again, I come from an immigrant family, and I think all of you do. If you told your parents that you graduated from university and you have $40,000 of debt, and mom and dad, I'm going to go work for a startup, to them, you're a failure. This was if you just can't find a good job, and that's why you're going to go do the
Yeah,
alternative.
yeah. To this date, my parents still don't understand why I work in tech, or they don't understand the concept of what a startup or tech is.
Oh my God! But
yeah,
and that's the crazy part of it. You can normalize working in a startup, and that was okay. And you can actually make a bigger impact. You can have way faster growth and kind of and support and what you can deliver on as an individual. But they just didn't realize. My father, and God bless them all, they support me 100%. But my father still believes till this day I fix computers for a living. Like that's what he thinks I actually do.
yeah.
And my father, again, he's 80 years old. I'm not going to try to change it. The support is fully there from both my parents. But you have to learn how to normalize this industry and get people to understand that mindset. So you went from having only a few incubators and call it a few hundred startups across the country to today we're at well over hundreds and hundreds of incubators and accelerator programs across the country and growing, and thousands, if not, I'm sure it multiplied by 10x, probably 7,000-8,000 startups across this country. So that change has been huge for us, and that in itself speaks volumes when you're trying to build the story and the narrative around the importance of the startup world on the Canadian economy. And so part of our early day challenges was actually being able to push that message forward, educate corporates, educate governments, educate venture capital, spaces and individuals, so that they're not just investing in the big companies, but rather looking at some of the smaller early stage startups and playing that part of advocate slash service providers slash kind of incubator slash everything. So it was tough, but I think we've come a long way.
Speaking to that, it looks like the vision that you kind of built out, it has resonated because, DMZ and its alumni have collectively raised over $1 billion. So that's a huge thing for obviously the Canadian ecosystem. So what does that milestone kind of mean to you, and why is it important for the startup ecosystem at large?
Yeah, look, I got to say, there's a humble brag to it, right? As Canadians, we can say that look how far we're coming, and we're not just a ecosystem. We are a leading ecosystem in the globe, and we are doing things that many only dream of. We are becoming a brand as a Maple Leaf going out around innovation, and that's really changing the narrative as well. And it shows the maturity of the space and how far we've come. Just having a few stories and not really. People will say, "Well, tell us who are the unicorns of Canada?" And now, you struggled. Honestly, you did struggle to find beyond the names of BlackBerry or Hootsuite before, and even Shopify now. And now you're looking at it like, well, there's Snap Commerce, and there's Ada, and there's a whole bunch of companies that are coming to life that are doing phenomenal work. And I think that in itself opens up the door for us to now start playing a much more serious role with the marketplace globally. We're able to attract a lot more people and talent. We're able to attract a lot of new dollars to the space, and we're able to change the policies that are being drawn out by government and by the leading kind of corporate players across the country to think more heavily and deeply on why this space is so important for this country to thrive and survive. Those are the high level reasons as to what makes us proud about achieving this $1 billion mark.
And what would you say has to be done to kind of continue to foster the success? A lot of times we say, we're the Silicon Valley of the North. I don't personally like when we say that because Canada is unique in itself, and we want to foster something unique to Canada. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think we should never compare ourselves to anybody. I think we are unique in our own way, and we have things that no one will ever have. Again, just pinpointing Toronto a little bit, being the most diverse city in the world, and I know that for a fact, draws on so many benefits that we should be able to leverage and do more of. But I think as we grow, there's a couple mindsets that we need to think about. Number one, it's doubling down on winners, right? It's being able to kind of go all in on companies that we truly believe are going to be big hits and call it the big bets of this country, and we need to make sure that we can support them. It's that the analogy of Canadians, we're so kind sometimes that people look at us as we climb the hill, and there's a carrot over the hill, but you have to get over the hill, and you see a few people going up the hill, but once they almost getting to the top, you see a few others fall back. As Canadians, we're like, oh my God, I got to go back and help everybody. So they, instead of climbing up the top, they go back down and they try to bring people back up again. The thinking should be that, listen, I'm not saying leave people behind. I'm just saying make it over the top. get the carrot, work your way back around, and then push them up rather than
Right.
trying to hold yourself back because others are not able to get it. So I say this in the sense that we should be able to double down on big companies rather than saying, you're doing great, keep going. We're not going to help you anymore because you're seem to be self-sustaining. Let me go help others.
Right.
So I think that's the first part. The second part is let's continue building a pipeline, you don't want to get a dry pipeline in the next few years because you haven't invested enough energy, time, resources, and money into seed stage companies, early stage
Yeah.
companies. People that have incredible ideas and potential, but they need that extra push to kind of get them through to the starting point, if you will. So being able to funnel in and support early pipeline is a huge component of this kind of stuff. And I think in many cases you need to also consider how do you incorporate um, diverse groups in the country as well, because I just
Right.
said diversity is our strength in many respects. How do you ensure that people from all walks of life in this country today are getting the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
engage in the world of innovation and entrepreneurship? I'm not saying create a country of all entrepreneurs. That would be a disaster.
Right.
We couldn't sustain that. But you create an environment for people to be able to engage, learn, appreciate, and then they can self-select whether or not they want to be part of this entrepreneurship journey or
Right.
whether they want to just be supporters, just like an arena. Not everybody plays soccer or football. People, you need fans to allow the game to happen.
Right.
Otherwise it just doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I like that carrot analogy because it kind of brings me to my next point here. DMZ actually recently kind of shifted its focus to helping focusing more on the early stage startups. And so they introduced a new kind of incubator model with the 18-month program. And so can you talk to us about that? Like, how does the new program differ from other incubators, and kind of why should, DMZ be the one that they go with?
Well, yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I think this kind of goes back to the idea of being able to be obsessed with quality, right? And really ensuring that we can provide each founder with their unique support that they need as individuals and as companies, rather than building a kind of a white label for everyone to kind of engage on. So this new model for us is really focusing on earlier stage companies right now because that's really where we see a big gap happening in the space. They're smaller and more intimate cohorts of founders, so only about 15 companies per cohort every 6 months. The program itself is about 18 months long because we can appreciate that you can't build greatness in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 months. It takes a journey and it takes a village to do so. We look at each individual founder's challenges and what they need to execute a go-to-market strategy or acquiring lighthouse customers or even being able to gain media exposure. And we prepare them for the next round of funding and support. And we want to see them grow. And it really is putting in so much more resources and so many more people per founder than we've ever done before. So we look at it and we say, well, how can we build an environment where people feel that they're actually that they're actually appreciated in everything that they're able to deliver on, and how do you kind of create 60 plus hours of one-on-one time to kind of give them the right help that they need to be able to grow and prosper. So it's for us, it's about being living the founder journey along with them. And I always tell my team, the minute you join the DMZ is the minute you've now become part of, call it 15 companies. You are now an employee of 15 companies. You now have to be supporting them as if you are one of them, right? And you can't necessarily, do anything or focus on anything other than that, and that's your life.
I love that. Around the startup environment in Toronto, I think helping those early stage companies kind of get really over that hump will kind of move that narrative within our ecosystem. But I wanted to get your opinion here, because this is something that we get from a lot of our listeners as well, in terms of how do we make the Canadian tech ecosystem more competitive. And like one of those things that you're doing right now is focusing on early stage startups, but I want to get your opinion there as well.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you, I think we need to encourage startup development across the board, generally speaking. So I know I talked about the growth over the past few years. That's the beginning. It doesn't mean that we've reached the height of it. This is still an early win that we need to continue building on and ensuring that we can kind of change minds and bring on additional people and not leaving people behind. and I mean that for any community, whether it be the Black community, the Indigenous community, the Asians community. How do you build an environment that can actually encourage all to participate in one way, shape, or form? I think the other part of it is that encouraging Canadian companies to think global from day one is a big part of it. So I think you need to have that mindset coming into it rather than trying to build that mindset as you grow your company. Because then otherwise you just become a small business, and that's great, and we need small businesses in the country. But the work that we do, and you folks are part of startups yourselves, it's about the big picture. It's about thinking big, thinking global, and having a true impact on the work that you're doing, so that you can actually attract others to say, "Wow, Canada's killing it. They're blowing it out the park. What can I do to kind of participate in that ecosystem, in that
Right.
environment, so I can do the same exact thing, right?" So last thing I would say is this is probably a long-term play, but the continuity of changing the educational curriculum. And I know
Yeah.
that it's not going to happen today.
I was just going to ask you on that if
But in my look, and as lucky as we are to have gone through an amazing Canadian educational system, I did not learn a thing about the possibility of building a business. I did not learn a thing about coding. I did not learn a thing about a lot of these things that or business acumen in general. I learned about sciences. I learned about geography and history, which is great. You need those things. But how do you double down on education as a streamline into something bigger? Because if we're going to wait to recruit Ahmed and Joe and Jennifer when they're 19 years old, then we've already lost the battle. We're not going to make it far in that part. We need to start engaging these people at the earliest stage possible legally. When their minds are actually able to think that way, which in my mind is kindergarten. Like, start there, start at kindergarten, get people to think differently, get people an environment where it's not restricted, and you're not creating a multiple choice exam, and you're not doing you're allowing people to kind of grow and prosper in what they're good at and what they can be exceptional at as individuals, and then contribute it to the rest of the country.
Obviously, we can't talk about tech without talking about Elon, because he's always in the news about everything. He's been trying to kind of push that idea of creating a school that doesn't have those tests, like the systems that we have in place, like that we do. It's very like open, traditional. There's no grades. And there's no. I don't think there's an age limit and stuff like that. It's kind of just whatever your mental capacity is at, you go along with that. What are your thoughts on that kind of schooling at all?
I love it. Look, I think it's hard. Again, I support it. I think it's an incredible idea. It's how do we do it, right? And this is where we need to kind of build an environment that would allow this kind of application of education to take place. Because if you try to do things and you've half-assed it, and you haven't really thought it through in a way that would actually be effective, then you're going to say, well, we tried, now we're going back to square one, and we got to kind of turn it back again, right? So think it through. But there are successful models, by the way. You look at the Scandinavian countries; they've done some fantastic work. And I've looked at Finland and Sweden. Their models have been so effective that they've actually now become the model globally for how people can actually change the classroom for children to learn and educate themselves or educate each other. It's a collective environment, as opposed to the model that we've seen for centuries now, which is one person at the front, 50 people in the back, chalkboard being written on, or whiteboard, whatever you want to call it. So you do need to change that mentality to ensure that you can actually kind of, again, get the best out of people, and you keep people excited and interested in what's going on.
Right, sure. And I think to that point, I think like education and even like life experiences should be I'm going to butcher the word experiential. There we are. Yeah, right. And so we should live life through executing rather than strategizing is usually what I kind of try to live by. So even if I try, fail, who cares? You learn something through that. So like, that brings me to the question here. Like, what are some common qualities that you kind of observed in successful founders?
Resilience, I think, is the first one, to be honest with you, because times are tough. This is not an easy world, right? And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But I will say that there's a lot of entrepreneurship theater that takes place, and people kind of come into the world of startups thinking that it's going to be really sexy and cool. And I'm going to have the title of CEO at the age of 18, 19. That's sure, that's part of it, but that's nothing at the end of it. All right. You got to be able to kind of to test the waters and understand that this is going to be a long journey ahead. It's not going to be easy, and success comes with time. And you have to learn how to understand the word no, and the word fail, and the word ineffective, and the word losing customer, or the word losing customer. So all these things you got to learn how to kind of grasp and move on from there as well, because it is a tough journey. And honestly, it's not an easy rush. So resilience is definitely one of the big things. Whatever it takes is another thing. Just the hustle and the grind. Kind of naming after your podcast, but there's a hustle that's required. You need to learn how to, sometimes when you hear the word no 1,000 times, just to push back a little bit to understand, can I turn that no into a possible maybe or even a yes, and be able to kind of, get over that finish line and kind of and see things through. Um, I also say I think there's got to be a level of positivity and positive energy around you as well, because it is a depressing space. And look, for anyone that tells you that being a founder is sexy, it is probably hands down one of the most depressing jobs on planet Earth today. You are putting your entire livelihood on the line. You are saying that I will take everything I own. I will refinance my home. I will take loans from the bank. I will max out my credit cards to build this thing that I fundamentally believe in, that will change the world or change an industry or change a sector, whatever it may be. And you're alone. It's a very lonely environment to be in. It's a lonely position to be in. You're under-resourced. You don't know what's going to happen the next day. You're trying to maintain payroll and try to keep people on your team somewhat happy, so they can actually at least pay the bills and put food on the table. So it is a difficult job to do. So having that level and that spirit of positivity plays such a long part in the marathon. Knowing that this is a marathon and that this is going to be a long-term engine, and you always have to be on. So I will say that this is why I think getting more and more open about mental health in the startup world, because it's depressing, and you can't get away from that. And it's okay to seek help, but as a leader, you always have to be the person, and you are the person at the top, one from the top, that people look to understand. Are we gonna get somewhere? Is there real potential to kind of to do something special here? And if people see you as an individual leader checking out, they will also check out with you, right? So you just got to be able to maintain that level-headedness. And the last thing I will say, just be real to you. The founders that I found are always the realest, are the ones that do the best. They're not in it because they are trying to bow down to an individual or an entity that wants them to do something. The founders that have really done exceptional in our lives that we know today have remained true to their purpose and remained true to what they were always aiming to accomplish. And I think that in itself is a skill set that's hard to come across these days, right? Just finding people that are genuine, real, and down to earth, that are trying to just do great and achieve greatness. So, those are just a few things, but I'm sure qualities are, there's so many that you can kind of touch on.
So that kind of wraps up the content portion of our podcast, where we like to ask you about your journey, understand, the things that you've been through and what we can kind of learn from your process. One thing that we like to end our podcast with is a lightning round, where we kind of toss some quick questions at you just to get to know you a little bit better. And so we're going to give you, normally we give like 3 or 4 questions, but we got some help from your team and we got some extra questions. So we're just going to fire some at you and
sure.
Let us know the first thing that comes to mind. All right. So the first one here, if you could have dinner with one person, who would that be from any point in time?
Let me do one dead, one alive. Dead, Muhammad Ali. Alive, I got to give it to the city, Drake. I'll do Drake.
Okay. Cool. I love it. We need Drake in the DMZ collaboration.
There you go.
The best piece of advice that you have ever received throughout your life, maybe life focused or career focused, whichever it may be.
Yeah, I think, look, there's a few. I know this is a lightning round, but I'm going to just say one of my mentors in life told me 3 things. Number 1, don't always worry about having the perfect plan. Just get things done, and it will shape out eventually. The second part of that advice was shine the light on others and not on yourself. And the third part of that was generosity of spirit. And I absolutely love that. And you kind of think about others before you think about yourself, and give as much as give more than you ever take. And I think it can define you as an individual. So those are some of the things that kind of stuck with me forever. And I think overall, the biggest advice that I always give people as well is that everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. So just tread lightly.
For sure. I love it. Obviously, we're stuck still within quarantines and lockdowns and things like that. What do you miss most about, pre-pandemic normal life?
Food, restaurants. I'm talking about the experience, man. The experience. I
Yeah.
don't want to just don't bring me. I don't mind eating here, but I want to go to restaurants. I want to sit down again and enjoy the environment, the just the feel of sitting there and being surrounded by people.
For sure. All right. And this is going to be a two-part question here. What is your most favorite place that you've traveled to? And what is the place that you're looking to travel to after things open up?
Well, good question. For those who don't know, I'm a cigar collector, and I've been for over a decade now. So Havana is the easy answer, and I don't mean Havana in the touristy sense. I mean Havana in like the just getting on the ground and knowing
Yeah.
what you're doing there. So Havana to go smoke my cigars and restock on cigars that I'm short of right now, and where do I want to go? Havana. It's one of the first places. It's not. I've been very fortunate. I've gone to more than 40 or 50 countries in my life, and I
Wow.
travel quite a bit. But there's something special that I really puts me at ease when I get into Havana, and I really mean Havana specifically. That's where I
Yeah.
feel very happy.
That's awesome.
Next question here. What is the best part about being the DMZ's executive director?
As the best part, and I always say the best part about my job is people. The worst part about my job is people. And it's just a matter of how you look at it and define it. So it just comes back down to people, man. Like I just love the energy and the vibe and the kind of the youthfulness and the creativity that comes with being in the space. It keeps me young, and it keeps me motivated, and it keeps me
Hmm.
excited. Honestly, like it's tell me someone that can kind of walk into a space, and not I don't mean or virtually walk into a space now, but walk into a physical space and know that everyone around you chose to be there.
Yeah.
They want to be there, and they chose to be there. Nobody is there because they're just looking for a paycheck. Because that's not how
Right.
the startup world works, right? Everyone beside you, around you, in front of you, chose to be there. It's the best job in the world. I really think so.
And you said it, not me. The best part is people and the worst part is people. So I'm sure you have long, stressful days. How do you like to come home and unwind?
um, Look, if I get a chance, like weather like this, either I can, go out with my wife for long walks, or I just smoke a nice cigar in the backyard. Or in other cases, I'm a big music person, so I just love putting on some music, and I like all sorts of music, whether it be, of course, Drake, or whether it be something a bit more classy like Andrea Bocelli, who I am absolutely obsessed with, and a bit more on the opera side of things. Just helps me unwind a little bit, so I love
Right.
it.
Nice.
Love it. Love it. And last question here, and we like to keep this for last because it tends to be the most controversial one. Do you like pineapples on your pizza?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No,
Yeah. Join
absolutely
the
not.
club. Join the club.
Absolutely not. I would never put it on ever. And if someone ever gave it to me, I just take off the pineapple and continue
Yeah.
eating.
Just toss
So
it
it's
off. Yeah. That's
Man.
okay. We'll take it. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Abdullah, this
That's
was
it.
great. We think you're doing an amazing job with the DMZ. We're super excited to see kind of where the Toronto tech ecosystem is going to be, maybe even a few months or a few years down the road, but it's looking promising. So thank you so much for being here and kind of sharing your story and your journey.
No, thank you guys, and much respect and love to both of you for doing the great work that you're doing. I know that this is all about amplifying the message and pushing the
Mhm.
stories out. So kudos to you both, and keep at it.
For sure.
Sweet.
And last piece here, kind of where can we kind of connect with the DMZ and where can people connect with you?
Well, with me, all my social handles it's for Twitter and for Instagram. It's A Snobar. So without the W, please. No W in Snobar, but A Snobar. And then obviously with regards to DMZ, it's dmz.ryerson.ca. So just feel free to log in, check us out, and or just shoot us a note, and we're always going to get back to you.